Hello and welcome to Cracking Culture Change. My name is Ella and today we're going to discuss how to move beyond profit by putting purpose at the centre of organisations. My guest today is Alyson Chadwick, co-founder and director of Hedgehog Strategy, who work with businesses to create strategic clarity and focused plans so they can accelerate performance. I'm also delighted to share that Pecan and Hedgehog have launched a partnership, pooling our skills and experience together to introduce a new service called People-Powered Purpose. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'll catch up with you at the end to share my reflections. Alyson, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, purposeful organisations. I'm curious to start with, what is a purpose-led organisation?
So there's been a lot talked about purpose-led organisations or purpose-driven or purposeful. There's all different ways, usually with the word purpose in there somewhere, of talking about organisations and how they are performing well in today's markets. And essentially, a lot of the conversation comes down to things that people are seeing, customers wanting, colleagues wanting, even investors and shareholders wanting from organisations in today's world. They're looking for organisations who not only provide great products, great services, but they also want organisations who look after their people, who make a difference in the world, whether that's about the environment and the planet, whether that's about helping support communities and communities that they work with. But they're looking for businesses who are clear about the difference they want to make in the world. And with the way that, in particular, sort of during and post the pandemic and people's mindsets and views on what they're looking for from businesses that they do business with, that's only increased. Now, when we're talking about purposeful organisations, I think that side of it, being clear on what impact you want to have on the world, is really important. However, I don't think that's the whole story when it comes to purpose. I think what makes purposeful organisation, or what makes successful purposeful organisations, are not just those that know the difference they want to make, but they're clear on how that actually works and leads what the organisation does. So it comes to life in the products and services they have, how they operate, their leadership and culture, how they make decisions within the organisation. So it truly is driving what they do as a business. It's leading their innovation agenda. It's leading how they operate as an organisation overall. And that's what makes the difference. And that's what makes a purposeful organisation successful.
So it's much more than just having a purpose statement as part of the strategy. It's absolutely woven in. What would I see if I landed in a purpose-led organisation? You know, I mean, so much of our world now in organisations takes place on Teams or some of our times in the office. What would I see? What would I hear that would tell me I'm in a purpose-led organisation versus one that's not?
So if you think about, and it's interesting what you said about it's much more than a purpose statement. So if I think about, if I go back over my career, many more years than I care to think about these days, but good strategy 20 years ago, 25 years ago, you were clear on what your purpose was, you were clear on what your vision was, but it didn't always, the purpose at that stage, it didn't always come to life in therefore what you did. I think the difference these days is it's not enough just to have that slogan on the wall or in your end of year financial results. It really is about how is that communicated, how is that discussed with colleagues in particular, in order to ensure that that is living and breathing every day in how the organisation operates. So for example, if you had an organisation that in particular was about, if I take sort of the co-op where I used to work, and it was about championing a better way of doing business for you and your communities, what you would then see coming from that is not only how the organisation thought about serving customers or members in the case of the co-ops, but also the impact that it would have on its communities, whether that's the communities in which it operated, where it had its stores and its other businesses, whether that's the communities such as its supplier communities. So it would think more deeply about, how do I bring this to life? How do I make this a better way of doing business for this particular community, and for you, because we had duality within that purpose as well. So it's really about taking that thinking through so that it's, as you say, it's not just words on a page. It does make a real difference in the decisions that are made, the way that performance is talked about, the way innovation is driven, and the way that people see the organisation operating.
That's very interesting. And so the supplier relationship's an interesting one, I think. You know, woven right. What would feel different to me as a supplier to a purpose-led organisation versus one that wasn't?
Sure. It'll obviously depend on what the purpose of the organisation is, because that will obviously influence that relationship. But you would expect it to be more of a, I guess, more of a partnership with that supplier. So if you think about the sort of the universe of different stakeholders that an organisation has, you know, sort of go back, you know, sort of late 80s, 90s, shareholder was king. You know, these days it's much more, it's not just thinking about creating shareholder value and how does this create better profits, better market cap, whatever the different financial metrics are. It's about thinking about that whole universe of stakeholders. Customers are obviously key in that. Colleagues are absolutely key in that. But suppliers is another one of those key communities. But if you're working in harmony with your suppliers, should be a better way of doing business for them, but also a better outcomes for you. And I think as you sort of play this forward in terms of how does purpose help drive the organisation, whereas I think there's a bit of a myth that purpose is all about doing good and therefore it's things that are good for the planet, it's giving money to charities and good causes and communities and things like that. But purpose absolutely does not need to be just about lots of things that you've got to spend extra money on. The real power in purpose is finding out where are the intersections with what you do as a business. But it should be absolutely about what you do as a business, because it is your purpose, it's your reason for being. And the real power is where that helps drive greater success for the business, but for all the stakeholders within that business.
Yeah, I love that description of how the word ecosystem is coming to my mind, of that the whole ecosystem benefits by the sounds that, you know, when you really are purpose led, the people working there benefit, the suppliers benefit, the investors benefit, the planet benefits, if indeed that is also part, you know, it's very interesting. And it strikes me that purpose led and being purpose led, as you were saying right at the start, around there's more expectation from all aspects of a market, customers, investors, etc., and customers, to be more purpose-led and have more of an impact than just profit, that everyone benefits from that. And this isn't just now about organizations who might sort of obviously be purpose-led because they have a social impact in some way anyway. It sounds like this really is an imperative for any kind of organization to consider how they want to be more purposeful. Is that fair? Or do you see organisations for whom this isn't such a relevant conversation?
I would say there's something in it for all organisations. I think the spectrum of, is their purpose wholly about social impact and environmental sustainability? There is absolutely a group of organisations for whom that's really high on the agenda in terms of their purpose. So somebody like a Patagonia is very clear that they're in the business to help save the planet, essentially, and their whole business model and their products, that they have that in mind when they're thinking about their business. You've then got at the other end of the spectrum other organisations who their purpose isn't as specific, that it's about sort of environmental or social concerns. However, that doesn't mean that they don't have those considerations in how they do business and some of the initiatives that they carry on as well. So Lego, for example, and I'm trying to recall Lego's purpose, is something about inspiring, the next generation of future builders.
Yeah.
I don't think I've quite got that right, but it's something in that vein. So it's nothing about environmental or social or anything in that perspective. However, that's not to say they don't do things that are actually going to be the right thing to do for the planet, for diversity and inclusion, and sort of other sort of social issues that they want to particularly champion and cause as well. But they'll do it with a framing of, this is our purpose and this is what we're going to do as an organisation in order to make that happen.
It's such a powerful argument from our perspective, specifically around culture. Increasingly, I mean, we've known this for years, but increasingly the idea that people want to work for an organisation that they are proud of, to be part of a community doing something that they care about, that is meaningful, the whole idea of meaningful work. And again, this symbiotic benefit for the people and the business to have a culture which is completely aligned to that purpose, and everyone is delivering on that. It's such a strong and compelling argument to consider this, I think. So how would someone go about it? Because it could feel quite overwhelming to some organisations, perhaps some leaders thinking, crikey, how do we get from where we are now? We're already under pressure with cost of living and energy and coming out of the pandemic and all of these multiple agendas that they have. How would they go about really orientating around their purpose?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. And I think in the context, and one of the things we quite often hear is we've already got a change plan or a change journey that we're on. Why would we do this right now? And I think there's, I guess, two parts to the answer. So the first one is, you don't have to do everything immediately. You don't have to go from where you are to, 100% embedding everywhere and being the beacon of purpose-led organisation overnight. You can do it at your own pace, and you should do it at the pace that's right for your organisation. And secondly, if you are on a change journey and you have got transformation plans in place already, that purpose that you develop, that you establish and that you embed can help frame what you're doing as a wider organisation as well, and help with that decision making around ongoing prioritisation and decisions around what you should and shouldn't be doing and where you go from here. So that's just as a framing for sort of getting into it. As we sort of look then to, so how do I go about it? What do I do? I guess there's sort of three phases or three key areas to think about. So the first one is very much, are you clear on what your purpose is? Or also, is everyone else all thinking the same thing when you say what your purpose is? So that first one is just establishing clarity around your purpose. So yes, ultimately it boils down to a clear statement and a phrase and something that no doubt will end up on walls and on screensavers and everywhere else. But getting to that, get clear on what your purpose is, but most importantly, ensure that you've got a common understanding of what that means. That doesn't necessarily mean that everybody recites it with the same words when they do from the 10-second to the 30-second to the 2-minute elevator pitch. But it does mean that everybody's got that same sense of what do we mean when we say this is the purpose of our organisation. So getting clear on what's the purpose of the organisation. And by that we mean getting clear on what's the reason why this organisation exists. What would be different? What would be missing if it didn't exist? What's the difference it's intending to have, and for whom within that context as well?
Just to pause on that bit, actually, Ali, I think that in itself is really helpful and really interesting because, again, in this crowded world, I think it can be easy for organisations to sort of try and be everything for everyone, and actually being clear on why they exist and for whom in itself can have a simplifying effect.
It can, absolutely. And when you're looking at, what businesses are we in? What businesses should we be in? Where should we go next? Again, it provides a framing. If you're clear on, why you are in business in the first place, then it gives you a claiming, a framing for where to go next in that sort of a conversation and that sort of a discussion. So get clear on your purpose. Thinking about a good purpose, it needs to be inspiring and motivating. You want people to follow it, colleagues in particular, but customers as well, and other partners that you work with. And therefore, it's got to resonate as well. It's got to feel real. It's got to feel like it is about your organisation. So it's got to come from the heart. It's part of the identity of the organisation. It's got to be real. It's got to be authentic. You can't make it up. You can't claim to be something.
Can't pinch someone else's then.
Well, you could if it resonated with who you are as an organisation. But yeah, you can't really claim to be, I don't know, you can't claim to be the greenest bank in the world if, when you lift up the covers, you're actually finding practices that are perhaps some way off best practice in that particular field. Yeah. So it's got to feel authentic. So that's purpose. So that's the first thing. The second thing is getting clear on, so how does that come to life across the organisation? How do you embed purpose in the day-to-day operating of the organisation? And that can happen across a number of different levels within the business. So first thing is, what does that mean in terms of your products and services? So are there specific elements that you might dial up or dial down, given what your purpose is? How does it, for example, inspire your sort of innovation agenda and thinking about how you're going to evolve your products and services either into new areas or new generations of the products and services that you already have? And really help support that agenda of creating differentiation through your purpose for your customers and colleagues and other stakeholders. So products and services is one key area. Second one is how you operate as an organisation. Obviously, key to that is leadership and culture. And that really is coming from the top down in terms of being a purpose-led organisation, and thinking about how that comes to life in how the culture comes to life, but also and how that is talked about, how that leads, how people think about the business, talk about the business, and make decisions within the business. And I guess that's the third area, which is governance and decision making. So performance being an active consideration in that. So rather than just poring over the spreadsheets and the numbers and looking at how the business is performing from a financial perspective, also balancing that with thinking about performance in terms of delivering on that purpose as well. So what are the metrics that you might want to be instilling within the organisation that react to or reflect what your purpose is? How do you want to actually think about the value you create beyond the financial value that you create for shareholders? How might you think about articulating that? And there's all different methodologies that people have looked at in the past. There's triple line, bottom line accounting and things like that. But what for your organisation would be a simple and an easy way to communicate the impact that you're having from a purpose perspective beyond just the financial results that you're talking about? And that leads on to sort of the third area, which is having looked at what you do as a business, thought about the areas that you want to embed purpose and really bring it to life in those different areas. The third area is, and how do you keep it alive and keep it front of mind for people? Obviously, leadership and culture is key in that, but your performance, both individuals and organisationally, how that flows into incentive schemes, for example, and that ongoing decision making, ensuring that it really is sort of top of people's minds as they are making decisions.
And what are some of the pitfalls you see tripping people up when they go about this? Are there common pitfalls to be mindful of?
Yeah, so I think there's I'd start with once you're clear on what your purpose is and how that might come to life, look at what you're doing that doesn't necessarily match up against that as well. So it's as much about thinking as well as what you're going to start doing. There's also think about, well, what are we going to stop doing? What could trip us up because people might call us out as? Well, that doesn't really line up with somebody who's talking about a set of values and a purpose that looks like this. So are there things that you might want to stop doing as well as start doing? The second one is, I said earlier about this sort of, again, a common misconception that this is all about doing good. So look for those areas where it is about reinforcing your business model, not just doing a set of initiatives for the sake of doing a set of initiatives that all look good individually, but actually when you try and create a common narrative across that, it's not entirely clear how it all fits together. So your purpose should create a framing that therefore it's more intuitive as to why you are doing these things as an organizer, and that helps your narrative, it helps your communication and the ability to share that both internally with colleagues as well as externally. More I guess more sort of tensions and difficult areas to navigate can be where you have I guess trade-offs that you need to make, where you've got decisions in particular, decisions you need to make, priorities perhaps. You're trying to plan or budget and work out how are we going to make this plan stack up. We need to decide whether we're going to do A or we're going to do B, or we're looking at some new products and we're trying to work out margins and they're just too thin and we can't do some of the other stuff we want to do. We might not have as much money in the kitty. So those trade-offs between quite often they're about the financial trade-offs versus the purpose impact, or where it starts getting quite sticky. And I think the key sort of thing I would say in that is have a clear framework for how you make decisions as an organisation. It's not always logic in terms of how you make these decisions. It doesn't always flow through a spreadsheet and a nice answer pops out the bottom. But you do need a framework and a process that's going to help you work through those trickier decisions. Who are the key decision makers as part of that, and how are you going to make some of those more tricky decisions when they come up?
And it strikes me with that one that that requires some zeal, if you like, in those senior leadership meetings and governance structures to allow the space to have that conversation and those debates. I think what we notice from the leadership and culture side of things is how, people we all do, don't we, get stuck in habitual ways of having certain conversations, and those decision-making meetings around resources and investment and what have you, the spreadsheets come in, the numbers are there, there's a quick discussion about, well, not quick, but necessarily, but it's usually very finance focused, numbers focused, off we go, to actually be willing to put the brakes on that and have a different kind of conversation, taking a purpose perspective on it takes a level of confidence to make sure that happens and to stay with the conversation to fully explore the different options and different perspectives.
A level of confidence, but also a level of maturity as an organisation as well. It's quite a big mindset shift there. Can't quite get those words out. So there's quite a big mindset shift there from, if you are an organisation that has traditionally looked at the numbers and the numbers have ruled everything, at the end of the day, cash is king. And you're now thinking, well, I've got other things to take into account and I could do that and that would make me more money. But actually, this allows me to achieve a wider impact and meet more of my purpose goals. Where's the balance within that? Where is it to say that you come down on one side or the other? And that's going to very much depend on the organisation, where it's at, and the people in the room that are making those decisions. And part of what will help fuel that is understanding your purpose, but understanding how your purpose can help fuel your business performance and success as well. So
Yes.
if you know that by supporting the community, 10% more people will do X with you, then you can start to see that there are business cases in how these things start to stack together. So understanding how your purpose is driving your business, but also understanding that some of the metrics and reporting that sits behind that will also allow you to sort of free up some of the questions and thinking around, well, how can this help drive my business forward?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And again, I'm thinking from our sort of experience around the culture side of things, the very tangible impact it can have on attracting talented people, keeping talented
Absolutely.
people,
Yeah.
because they, you know, they believe in what the organisation is doing. And your earlier point about helping you stop doing things too, I think that's very empowering for people right in the heart of the organisation, not just at a senior leadership team level, because when it's really embedded, it helps them create capacity by knowing what to prioritise. And having a really good case for saying no to things, or at least challenging back on, well, actually, out of these 5 things, maybe we don't need to do these 2. It's not as closely
Yeah.
aligned to what we're really about. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it
Well,
supports the empowering within the
yeah. Yeah.
organisation, both in a ability to challenge, but also to be able to sort of empower the teams and decision making to take place at a lower level
Yeah.
under a clear sort of framework. It also supports communication and understanding of some of those
Yeah.
decisions as well. So if decisions are taken in the boardroom, if they're framed in the context of purpose and wider strategic goals perhaps as well, then again, that understanding of, so why are we doing this and why aren't we doing that? It sort of takes away some of that sort of worry and noise that comes when decisions are made and nobody really understands why.
Yeah. Yeah. What's listening to you, Alyson, there's you have such a strength of belief. I share it
Mm,
around why we should have more purpose-led organizations and
yeah.
why leaders should really go down this route. Where's your strength of belief in this come from? What's inspired you most over the years and really given you that kind of conviction around this?
I would say it's always good or I guess your beliefs and your experiences are always stronger from things that you've lived through yourself.
Mm,
And if I look back over my career and I sort of think back to the early days, I was a graduate consultant in the 90s, sort of work hard, play hard sort of time, and it was thought about, but it wasn't really sort of the key metric that people were thinking about. At the end of the day, most of the work that we did for clients back in the 90s was very much about how do we create greater value for shareholders, essentially,
mm,
whether that be sort of public shareholders or whether that was sort of different types of businesses. And when I first went to work in a cooperative business, it was interesting to see the tensions there between people who'd come from sort of footsie backgrounds, coming in looking at how do we drive the balance sheet forward and the P&L and what are the options, and most of it was around thinking about value. And then alongside that, you had some very strong beliefs in terms of what the organisation should be doing from an ethical perspective, because it had a very clear ethical agenda, and that's very much what it traded on as its positioning. So this was back in cooperative
mm,
bank days in sort of the turn of the century, and it was interesting to see how those two played out. And there was almost a sort of a wider gap than you would have expected, because those that believed it should be all about the ethics didn't think we should make any money at all, which is obviously
that would
not
be a
true
dirty thing
either.
to do.
That would be a
Yeah.
dirty, making a profit is a dirty thing to do. It should be all
Yeah.
about the ethical policies and campaigns, and the truth is it's somewhere in the middle, because you have to make money as an organisation. You have to be
Mm,
sustainable as an organisation, which means you have to make some money, because whoever owns you, whether it's a cooperative or whether it's traded on the FTSE, at the end of the day, you've got to reinvest in your business. You've got to ensure that you've got a sound financial and capital footing for the future, because you're supporting all your stakeholders. So, you've got to ensure that you're safe as an organisation. So having sort of lived through some of those conversations, and in the sort of the 2010s, 2013 in particular, as Co-op started to go through its own big questions of questions about financial strength and how it needed to restructure the business, looking at re-establishing what the purpose of the organisation was then. I worked on, what is the purpose of the organisation, and how do you then embed that across the organisation? And in particular, I then led the work around the membership proposition and how that really sort of brought the whole purpose of the organisation to life, the you and your community aspect in particular. And I think just seeing how that experience for me really sort of brought home how purpose, if you embed purpose at the heart of the organisation in a way that really drives the organisation and drives it in terms of what its aspirations are, what its goals are, and the actions that it is then going to take, the performance then comes through that as well. If you're doing the right thing for customers, you're doing the right thing for communities, that becomes self-fulfilling as long as you're doing the right things. And obviously, it's not we have a purpose and therefore let's come up with some great zany ideas that everybody's going to immediately buy in. It's still got to be grounded in customer insight, research, working with colleagues to really understand on the front line, how does this work? What do people care about? Is this going to make a difference? But I think having that opportunity and that experience of really living through a transition and transformation within an organisation to really drive purpose to the forefront was really powerful for me.
And for others, what would you recommend if there's just one? There's so much insight and experience you shared in the conversation. If you wanted to leave people with kind of one top tip, they've started thinking about becoming purpose-led. What's your
one? Am I allowed 1.5?
Yes, you can have 1.5. Don't think anyone's ever asked for 1.5 before.
So my 1.5 top tips would be: start with getting clear on what your purpose is and what you really mean by that, because that will drive everything else. And the half is make sure you involve your colleagues in that. And it's not just about a boardroom exercise. It truly is involving people from across the organisation to get that breadth of insight and views and clarity from people to help sort of discover what your purpose is and how you're going to bring that to life across the organisation.
Lovely. There's a discovery spirit to it. It's not a purely academic, intellectual.
Absolutely.
Room full of senior people working it out. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed talking about purpose today.
What a great episode to kick off season 2. Thank you, Alyson, for joining me. One of the early things that struck me in our conversation was how beneficial being purposeful is to all of the stakeholders in the ecosystem of an organisation, the people who work there, the customers or those that they serve, the organisation itself, investors, if that is relevant for you. And that it's not necessarily about spending more money. In fact, it can be quite the opposite. It can help you decide what to stop. It can bring simplicity and focus to what you're doing, which feels enormously relevant and beneficial at the moment, with leaders having huge change agendas that they are trying to cope with and fit things together. I also loved what Alyson was saying about who this is for. Can every organisation become purposeful? Yes, they can. And that might look and feel like something slightly different depending on what it is that you do. But it's about the leadership having the confidence and the maturity and the stamina to really follow through on becoming purposeful, because there will always be trade-offs needed. There will always be debates to be had, and you've got to be willing to use your intuition as well as data to guide your decision making. And the other thing that I loved as part of it was, this is not a top-down exercise, becoming purposeful. It's about a discovery with all of the people involved in your organisation to work out what your purpose is and what that really means for you in what you do and don't do, the decisions, and how you go about doing your work. So if we have sparked your interest about people-powered purpose, I really recommend downloading our ebook. There's a link to it in the show notes. It's got lots of the latest research about why being purposeful is successful and increasingly important. If you need help to crack your culture, do get in touch with us. podcast@pecanpartnership.co.uk. Please subscribe to the series. If you've listened to us on Apple or Spotify, we would love you to leave a review. It helps get the podcast out to a wider audience. If you've watched us on YouTube, drop a question or a comment in the comments section, and we'll look forward to you joining our next episode. Thank you.